Hi everyone, today we're going to be talking about characteristics of lines. So the first thing that we'll talk about is slope. You may recall that slope is defined as an m and can be calculated by finding the rise over run or by using the slope formula y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. You will also hear slope referenced as rate of change or constant rate of change or the change in y over the change in x. Slope will play a critical part in the next 4 sections. This is because each one of the next 4 types of lines have a specific characteristic that is defined by either the slope and or the variables present. Let's get started. So let's talk about horizontal lines. Horizontal lines will always be of the form y equals 0x plus b. And as we know, whenever we multiply a number by 0, it just gives us 0. So a simplified way that we can write this is y equals b, where b is just some number. So notice that the slope is 0 here. So let's take a look at this graph and see if we can figure out why the slope is 0. So here we have the line intersecting the y-axis. So here's the y-axis at some point 0, comma b. So this point that I've highlighted here, that's 0, comma b. And let's choose another point. Maybe this one, I'm going to call it -3, comma b. And let's try to calculate the slope here. So I have m equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So let's go ahead and label those. I'm going to call this one x1, this one y1. I'm going to call the 0 x2 and the b y2. So now that I've labeled those x coordinates, if I fill them in here, we have y2 is equal to b minus y1, which is also b, and x2 is 0 minus x1 is -3. So if we simplify that, the numerator we have b minus b, which is 0, and in the denominator we have 0 minus -3, which becomes +3, and 0 divided by 3 is just 0. So here that kind of helps illustrate why horizontal lines have a slope of 0. So you can write this little note to yourself and you can write it however you want, but horizontal lines have a slope of 0. Another thing that might be helpful to you in remembering this is, so we have our x coordinates and our y coordinates. So notice that all of the y coordinates are always b, no matter what. So I could plug in 2 for x and my output would still be b. I could plug in 0 for x and my y value would still be b. I could plug in -3. So note that y is always equal to b, and so the equation of this line again is just going to be y equals b. So we've talked about horizontal lines. Now let's switch over to vertical lines. Vertical lines will always be of the form x equals a, where a is some real number. Notice this is not in the same form as standard slope-intercept form, because slope-intercept form looks like y equals mx plus b, and here we have x equals a. So it's not quite the same in that we don't have y showing up at all. So let's take a look at the graph and see if we can't figure out why that is. So I'm going to choose 2 points. We have the point here 2, 4, and another point 2, 3. So I'm going to go ahead and label those. So I'll call this one x1, this one y1, x2, and y2. So now if I'm using our slope formula, m equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. If I fill those values in, we're going to get m equals 3 minus 4 over 2 minus 2. And if we simplify that, 3 minus 4 is negative 1, and 2 minus 2 is 0. Now, you've probably heard somewhere in your life before that you cannot divide by 0. It will lead to bad things happening. And so we say that this is undefined. And so this line does not have a slope because it is vertical. And so really there's no m value here. And again, if I made an xy table, let's fill this out. So some points on this line are 2, 4, 2, 3, 2, 1. We also have 2, negative 2. And the pattern here is that the x value is always 2. And so that kind of helps us to think that the equation of this line is x equals 2, because no matter what, the x value is always going to be 2. Parallel lines will always have the same slope, but different y-intercepts. So we have this example down below, and here we have the equation y equals negative 3 halves x plus 1 and y equals negative 3 halves x plus 7 graphed next to each other on the same plane. What do you notice about these two lines? If you said that they have the same slope, you would be correct. So here, this line has a slope of negative 3 halves, and this line also has a slope of negative 3 halves. So they have the same slope. Do you notice anything else about these lines, and what do you wonder about them? Something I would wonder is, will they ever cross or intersect each other? And the answer is no. So parallel lines do not intersect. And that is because they have the same slope. So go ahead and take a moment to write a note to yourself. Highlight what helps you remember the characteristics of parallel lines. Perpendicular lines mean the lines given are exactly 90 degrees or at right angles to each other. Again, the slope will be a critical aspect of noting if the lines are perpendicular or not. What do you notice about this graph? Hopefully you said that there is this box thing here, and hopefully that's something that you've seen before, maybe in like a geometry class. This box or square is indicating that the angle between these two lines is a right angle, or in other words, a 90-degree angle. What do you notice about these two lines? So we were talking about the slope. In the previous example, when lines are parallel, their slopes are the same. Here, you might notice a relationship between the slopes of these two lines. So here, the slope is 3, and here the slope is negative 1/3. So what do you wonder? Well, perpendicular lines will have slopes that are opposite reciprocals of each other. What does that mean? What is an opposite reciprocal? Well, let's just start off with the term reciprocal. So if you have a number such as 1/4, its reciprocal is the number that you get by switching the numerator and the denominator. So if I swapped the 4 and the 1, then the reciprocal would be 4 over 1, or just 4. So we say that 1/4 and 4 are reciprocals of each other. And the word opposite is just used to denote the sign. So notice that 3 and 1/3 are reciprocals of each other, but they also have the opposite sign. 3 is positive and negative 1/3 is negative. So that is what we mean by opposite reciprocals. Take a moment to write a note to yourself and highlight what helps you remember the characteristics of perpendicular lines. So on the next 2 pages of our outline, we have 2 challenge questions. So go ahead and attempt these questions on your own, and notice at the bottom of each page, the answers to these questions are given. If you're struggling with these and want some extra help, please feel free to reach out and ask about them, and I would be happy to help you with that.